We are so excited for you guys to listen to this episode. We had the opportunity to speak with Johnetta Boone, who is an incredible costume designer. She is currently working on the set of the hit series Yellowstone. Jonetta tells the story of how she got to where she is now. We also talk about the show, the costumes, the characters, and what it takes to be a costume designer. Enjoy!
Do you love horses and live the equestrian lifestyle? Be sure to check out our brand new blog at www.yourhorsefarm.com. We publish 3 posts per week and feature a free printable equine checklist every month. Yourhorsefarm.com is a great equine online resource, so be sure to share with all the horse lovers in your life. And remember, laugh much and ride often. This podcast is brought to you by Ram Horse Fencing and Stalls, the one-stop shop for your horse farm. Ram is family-owned and operated and has been in business for over 30 years. We welcome you to call in and speak with an expert about your next project today at 866-653-8984. Again, that's 866-653-8984.
So I just wanted to say hello and thank you guys so much for having me on your podcast. It's great to be a guest, and I'm super excited to just share some insider tips and some insider thoughts with regards to not just Yellowstone, but the equine industry as well. It's a great place, to start when you're looking from the inside out and from the outside in for people in the film industry, and then for you yourselves as the viewers or as participants in the equine industry, or vendors or horse owners and performers, just to look at other ways to do things. My name is Johnetta Boone. I'm the costume designer for Yellowstone. I'd like to start by saying that I am the department head of the department, which means that I'm sort of the CEO, which is how it works in most businesses. I oversee all the costumes on Yellowstone, as well as overseeing, sometimes we collaborate with the art department with colors and things of that nature as well, so that the whole show is very synonymous with the look. We take all of our lead from Taylor Sheridan, who's our creator. He also writes the show. He's brilliant in everything that he does. So we love taking the lead from him. And then our job is to sort of take the reins, as we say in your world, and steer the horse in the direction that it's supposed to go. I have a crew of anywhere from 14 to 16 people working with me in my department, and we all together work seamlessly to bring the vision to fruition. And so typically our day could start even as early as yours. You guys, your day starts when the sun comes up, and for us, or before the sun comes up. And so for us, our day starts that early as well. We could start as early as 3:30 in the morning and go until 9 o'clock at night, in some cases, if it's a big day and if we have a lot of travel. So when we start our days, we start off with making sure that everything is prepped and ready. So in your world, in the equine world, you would make sure that your horses are carefully blanketed if it's cold, or that they're warmed up if it's cold, or if it's too hot, they get water and food. And that's how we start our day as well. Our day will start with, we have trailers, pretty much the size of your horse trailers, that carry our costumes to each location. And then we will start with prepping everything that the actors are to wear for the given scenes that are coming up. One of the things that is really spectacular for everyone to recognize is that within the film industry, we really encompass every world. So just for instance, outside of costumes, we have a full catering staff. We have a full medical staff. We have a full horse staff, both on camera and off camera. We occasionally have farriers that come in. We have an art department with graphic arts. We have, within my department, we have seamstresses. We have ages and dyers, where if you have an art background, that comes into so much help. In the art department, they have their own graphic artists as well. We may have, we have a seamstress in our department. We have, milliners who are able to shape hats in some cases. So it's a really well-rounded, I call it the circus because it's almost like that. We pick everything up, we travel in caravans, in our trailers, we set up a whole world in and of itself. Everyone gets to work in their respective areas, carpenters, everything that you could imagine is part of our world. And then we pack everything up at the end of the day, in some cases, or at the end of the week if we're at a location for longer than one day, and roll on to the next. So it's sort of like a traveling horse show. If you're going from event to event, you'll take your horses, you'll get them prepped, you'll perform, then you'll pack everything up, and then you'll travel to the next event.
Wow.
Cool.
How long
You
does
have
that
to be tired. You get tired at the end of the day.
Well,
That's a lot.
sometimes yes, but you learn to pace yourself because we know that our days are long, and a lot of times our feet are in the mud or in the arenas with the cow and the horse poop. So we just learn how to manage our day and to manage our wealth and health as well.
So how long does a season from beginning to end take you to get through one season of, I would just imagine, like filming?
Yes, so that's a great question. So for us at Yellowstone, our seasons usually last from what's called pre-production, which is when everyone joins the team. And then we go into our respective meetings to talk about how we're going to accomplish what's happening in the season to come, to the last day of filming and the last day of wrap, which is when we wrap everything up and get it all prepped and set aside, whether it's in boxes or containers or just shrink wrapped for the next season. It could take anywhere from 6 to 8 months. Wow. And that doesn't include the accounting process. So it's almost a whole year for each season to go from the very start to the very finish.
And do you come?
And it sounds like and we're all traveling that amount of time. So my whole team, everyone comes from, we're all dispersed from different places. I live on the East Coast. I would say 4 or 5 more of my team members may live on the East Coast, anywhere from Maine to Florida. And then we have people in the Midwest and people on the West Coast as well, from as far as Washington State to California, of course, which is the sort of the nucleus of the film industry. But we come from all over. I have had people on my crew from Texas and from Arizona and from Wisconsin. It's just everyone's from everywhere.
Yeah.
And does it start coming in with the script already ready and you guys just go from there, or how does that process take place?
That's another great question. So generally the scripts are already prepared. We may have 4 to 5 scripts prepared when we get there, because we don't start filming until 8 weeks after we've arrived, and then we'll receive the remainder of the scripts, or all the scripts may be prepared when we arrive, and then we will just do minor tweaks throughout the season. Also, when we're filming, sometimes when you're filming television shows, you are filming in order. So you will film per episode. You'll film episode 1, and then you'll film episode 2. Well, for us, and as you can see with Yellowstone, it feels like a movie. So we actually shoot it like a movie. It's not encompassing of each episode. It's just wherever the episodes are taking place. If we're in that environment, then we will film the details of that episode at the moment that we're there.
So you've explained to us, like every person has a job there and everybody, like there's multiple jobs that you can do. How did you come into this, and how did you find this kind of a job?
Yes. So I went to, I personally, myself, I went to design school. I went to school in New York at Fashion Institute of Technology. I studied fashion buying and merchandising as a major and design as a minor, because I found that everyone's creative. Even people that don't think they're creative and can draw a stick figure, they're still creative. Everyone has their own creative places in life. So the question is how you can allow your creativity to become a business. And so I decided to go at the creative aspect of where I function the most excitingly and learn how to use it and utilize it and have it live as a business. Because it doesn't matter if you're extremely creative if you aren't able to sell your work.
Mm-hmm.
So I studied at Fashion Institute under the buying and merchandising program, and went and had design as my minor and focused on that. And while I was in school, my friend's aunt was an editor at Harper's Bazaar, and she was leaving the magazine full time, and she was going out to work as a stylist that was working freelance. And she asked, we were finishing high school and going to college. And so she says, well, you guys, I'm looking for new assistants. I haven't quite found what I'm looking for. I wanted to know if you guys wanted to come on board. And she went to NYU, and we, of course, with great excitement said, yes, we'll come,
wow.
of course.
That's cool.
So while we were in school, we worked with her, which was fantastic, and learned the ins and outs of the entertainment industry from the print perspective. And then once I shifted from New York back, I live in the DC area, actually. So when I came back to the DC area is when I found my love for film. I worked on television shows in New York before I shifted into film full time. But I prefer film because it's moving, it's alive, it's interactive. You know, that's where I found my love and my passion. And it's great because the film industry also found me as well.
Yeah.
Because, you know, with DC being outside of the core film areas, it's not, most people wouldn't think that you would have a career in film. And people still wonder, how is it that you live in Washington, DC and you work in this industry? Well, because I got my rooting in New York. I was in New York for decades. And then once I moved back, I had been very well established, and it was okay for me to live outside of the core cities. And that's another thing for, you know, your viewers and your listeners to understand, that it doesn't matter if you live in a small town. If you have a great skill and talent, you can be discovered wherever you are. And sometimes it's even better, you know, when you find people that are outside of the core cities, because they have another sense of richness and core values that you don't find necessarily with everyone that works in the industry cities.
Yeah. Did you ever have experience in the equine world?
Well, I couldn't say formally experienced. When I was young and a teenager, I used to go horseback riding every weekend. That doesn't really count, but it counts a little bit, you know.
It counts.
I mean, I love horses. We have friends that have horses, and so we would, you know, adventure off with them and do things of that nature a lot. My husband and I actually considered buying a horse, but because we travel so much, they would just be spending their life with a boarder. So that didn't make any sense, you know?
Yeah.
But we have lots of people in our lives that have horses. So, and I love that horse world. It's really great. I mean, if I could get on a horse today, I would.
Yeah.
So, I just had a question. In the regards to horses, now the horses, the way that their saddles and everything, do you work with that as well too? Like the blankets or the design of what, you know, how that looks too, or is that separate from what you do?
So each area, that's a great question. Each area is designed with its own sort of department. So the blankets and things would most normally come from the props department, and depending on where the blankets are, they would come from the set decorator. So it just all depends. But I don't typically, outside of the clothing that the cast wears, that everything else is generated from another department.
Okay. Well, I just have to say, in I don't know which season it was, the character Beth had on this most beautiful coat when she was outside talking. It looked so,
that's the Pendleton,
you know, which
coat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That was beautiful. And I'm like, oh, when I saw that coat, I'm like, that was just gorgeous. But it just fit everything. They all have all their clothes just look wonderful. But I mean, it just fit that scene so beautifully. And I was just so taken back by her coat. It was beautiful. You know, a lot of beautiful things, but that one stands out to mind.
Yeah. So there's one particular vendor that takes the Pendleton blankets and turns them into the cloaks, which is what they're called.
Wow. That's cool.
And they're quite stunning.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was beautiful. Yes, very good job. Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there's a lot of clothes, obviously, and probably a lot of vendors. How do you seek out all of the vendors for the show?
Yes. So when we come together, once we've gotten the script, that sort of determines where my vendor pool would come from.
Okay.
In a lot of cases, I go to the traditional sources. For instance, when we first started, we Greeley did our hats. They were fantastic there. Then we segued into Burns Cowboy because we were in Park City and Burns is in Park City.
Mm-hmm.
So it just made it a lot easier for us to get hats from them. They could make us a custom hat in a day. Then if we're talking, we use of course, we like to stick with what's already entrenched in the culture for decades. So Wrangler, of course, would be our go-to jean, or Cinch. Kimes Ranch is a great jean, but they're a bit more fashionable and not so traditional. So of course, who would wear a Kimes Ranch jean is someone that is not so much a senior, unless they are a hip fashionable senior, which there are fashionable seniors. But that's, we would go to those brands, and then sometimes I would go outside of that world and introduce a brand that is more of a trendsetter, but is also welcome in the equine world as well. And right now, everyone is influenced by the whole Western apparel. So everyone's doing Western shirts right up to Dior. It's very interesting, right? Then you have Ralph Lauren, of course, who's been doing Western forever. So it just all depends. And it also depends on the character. I won't put Ralph Lauren on a rancher or a wrangler who is traveling from job to job, because he only has 5 things to wear to begin with. They all fit in a duffel bag, as Taylor says. And then they're not going to spend $700 on a Western shirt. So it's, it just depends on who the character is and the world that they're in, and the authenticity that has to be consistent with who they are. And that's what tailors and determines which vendors I use. And then in some cases, I'll pull from vintage resources if I need, or if I'd love to have a one-of-a-kind item. That's almost always where I would find authentic ones, as opposed to ones that are custom made.
Interesting.
I love the ranchers outfits. They're just so awesome. And when they wear these, then when they're on the set and they wear them, then obviously, they're out with the horses and in the dust. Then, is that just, I don't know how do you take those back and try to clean them up, or leave them like they are? Of course, they're ranchers, right? So is that part of what you do too?
Yes, so we have a ager and a dyer. So they're called an ager dyer, and their job is we do a lot of pre-aging, so that when they get to set, they already look like they've been working all day. And then we manage that and maintain that throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, if that same costume is going to work the next day, we don't clean it up, because then it would take twice as long to get it to the place where it is. And then also, people don't, if you know that you're going out to do muck work today, tomorrow, and the next day, you're going to put on those same pair of coveralls or that same pair of jeans every day you wake up. Sometimes even at home, if I know I'm doing yard work, I love working in my yard. I'm not an avid gardener, but I love working in my yard. I will put on that same pair of jeans every time I go outside. It doesn't make sense to put clean clothes on, So that's what we do with our horsemen, with our ranchers as well. Everything has to be authentic, and everyone understands that. A lot of our ranchers are actual cowboys, so they certainly understand that. And then the actors, we've had to sort of train them to understand that, no, this isn't dirty, it's movie dirt. Some of it is dirt from yesterday, and we're going to put it back on today so that it's consistent.
That's funny.
And their look just matches them. Like, for example, Rip is absolutely, look at, like
Sam's in love with
really
Rip.
thinks he's a wonderful character. So we just have to talk, could we just, how, I know I'm sure probably how it was written, but then do you take that and say, I know you all probably work together, but, to form his character of how he looks, and he has that look about him, and he has that, the main, person over everybody looks. So is there anything to that, you know, I mean, do you have anything with that you feel that you work on, or it just forms itself?
Yes. So, you know, when we're developing the characters and the costumes for the characters, it's important to have that be in full relationship with who they are. So Rip's character, he's not just a foreman, but he comes from such a tattered life. His background is really one of such tragedy. So it makes sense that he's always in dark clothing. He's not in mourning, and he is kind of in mourning. You know, he lost his mom at a very young age, tragically, and just everything he does. He doesn't have anyone in his life but the ranch. And there are people out there like that. And while he may like to go to another color of happiness, he never does, because black also seems to translate as being a very serious color. Or non-color rather, because it's the absence of color is where black comes from. So we keep him in dark tones so that he maintains who he is, being the boss and the foreman, you know, and following John Dutton's lead and keeping everything in order with the Wranglers.
That's just really, I mean, it really does. The characters really stand out to us from our side. They're the real people, not, you know, so, but it's really, you know, that's Beth and Rip, and, you know, but I mean, but that's just so interesting how you form their character through their clothing too. I mean, it makes a huge statement. I know you know that, but you know, we see them as that, and it forms their character as well. But he's quite the character. They all are. They're just unbelievable, every one of them. So,
well, thank you so much for that. Didn't mean to cut you off. You know, it's, if you pay enough attention in life, then you notice that people in life dress the part for whatever their position is. Moms dress as moms, you know, they always wear things that could be spilled on their blouse, or that, you know, it's like you've got carpenters who are always wearing Carhartt or some sort of workwear. You've got, you know, everyone has clothing that fits their role in life and their position in work. And it's very seldom that people stray away from that. And so in addition to that, then people have colors that they like that work best for not necessarily their complexion, but for their mood, or they, you know, or they like to wear certain styles because it makes them feel good. So we've got, you know, for instance, some of our cowboys don't necessarily wear your traditional Western snap front shirt. They prefer a button-down shirt, just because of how they work, you know, on their own farm or ranch. So we like to incorporate that sense of individuality with each of our characters. It was very interesting, because I had someone reach out on Instagram and send me a message about the fact that Rip wears Levi's, and said, you know, people don't wear Levi's. And I said, well, here's the thing. Levi's is the first denim ever made, and it was made as a utilitarian workwear. Then it shifted over into the ranch world, and then Levi's decided that they didn't want to continue in that area, and Wrangler came along. So there are still some cowboys that do like the fit of Levi's. Not the predominant culture of a cowboy does wear a Wrangler generally, and then into the more current brands like Cinch or Rockaware or some of the other brands. But for the most part, your average cowboy wears a Wrangler, and some of them do wear Levi's.
Do you have a favorite costume that you just really liked, or is it just, there's just so many, but is there something that really stood out to you that you liked so much that you saw when it all came together?
Well, there are so many. And of course, you know, I love Beth. Her costumes are fantastic. And she, I mean, as a character, as a person, she's British. So the fact that she's able to nail the dialogue and the dialects constantly, and you believe that she's American and live in a Montana daughter. And then, you know, when we get to play the floral against her sternness. I just love that contrast,
Yeah.
you know? I love the contrast. And then of course I love, you know, being able to dress John Dutton because he is outside of, you know, he's outside of just your regular ranch wear. So it's nice to be able to look at more finer quality shirts and things of that nature. That's really great as well. But I love the whole world because it's so diverse. You know, I love doing the barrel racers. I love everybody.
Yeah. Do any of the cast members want to be more hands-on with the costume design process?
Mm, let's see. Do any of the characters want to be more hands-on? Beth is definitely hands-on with her character costumes, and that makes sense. You know, I mean, what she brings to the table is just really well thought out, and she's, you know, a lot of times what viewers may not be aware of is the fact that that characters are being developed as we're creating their costumes. Because some people, we have quite a few of our actors who are not horsemen. They are not, you know, cowboys, or they may be part-time cowboys. Some of them do have, well, many of them are actual cowboys. Then of our acting cast, some of them have family members that are cowboys, but they're actors. So they act in many different veins, you know? So they defer to us and our expertise of what it is that we do. And then we have the actual cowboys who we absolutely welcome any input that they have. Forey, who's one of them. I mean, he's been a cowboy since he came out of the womb. So he absolutely, I mean, he shares, for instance, his jeans are starched, you know, with a heavy starch. Who wears heavy starch jeans these days? Not many people, right?
Yeah.
But we absolutely defer to that's his style on and off camera, you know? And he's one of the very few that shifts into a more comfortable shoe when he's outside of riding, so he doesn't have to wear his cowboy boots, you know, so we'll get chukkas for him. So those kind of things, you know, it's what do you wear when you're off the horse? You don't always wear a cowboy boot, or when you're out in the barn and doing other things, you'll put a work boot on. Or maybe the weather is horrible and you have to put on something other than a cowboy boot for proper traction, you know, when you get off the horse. So we love that that sometimes we do get that input from them for particular scenes to not just assist in their character development, but also for comfort and for practicality when they're out there working.
How much research did you have to do, I guess, going into all of this before, you know, like, I guess after reading the script, you know?
Sure. So I do a ton of research all the time. I like life as research. So I will find myself, you know, if there's time, pre-pandemic, of course, I would go to rodeos before we started filming. But also I like to just visit with, you know, our friends that have horses. My agent actually has a horse. She has beautiful horses. So it's nice, you know, I kind of stay in the world because everything is evolving and everything changes all the time. There are some things that remain the same, but as in every world, every environment, things do change a little bit. So if we're not up with what the change is, then it challenges our authenticity when we're doing looks for characters for camera.
I think
So
that
we just try to stay in the know.
the costumes are such a prominent storytelling aspect of its own when we're watching it just as viewers. But how do you feel when you actually get to watch it and see all of that come to life that you put together? Like, what does that look like to you when you do that?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. That's awesome. I actually feel quite a sense of accomplishment when if I can look at a project that I've done and be able to separate myself from the project and actually enjoy looking at what unfolds on screen, then that means that I've done my job. You know, I'm able to not necessarily look at things that are not synonymous with the environment, and the characters actually have come to life. then I can just really take a breath and of relaxation and relief. Because not all times does that happen. Sometimes you look at the screen and you think, I could have made a different choice with that, because for whatever the reason is. And, in some cases with this particular project is great because Taylor gives us a lot of leeway to just come in and do our job. You don't get that opportunity with every show. With some shows, you have your producers and your creatives and your actors who really want to be more connected to the costumes, and sometimes they push you in a direction and have you make decisions on things that you may not normally make, and then you look at the screen and you think, I shouldn't have given in. I should have stuck to my guns and stayed with what I was thinking. So with this particular show, it's great to be able to do that, to look and say, wow, everything really does look pretty authentic. And it helps that the viewers are chiming in and confirming that. It means the world to me that yourselves and the other viewers are actually looking at the show and looking and feeling that it truly represents the world that you live in every day.
Yeah.
That means more than anything.
So did you interviewed with Taylor Sheridan for the job, for your current position?
I actually inherited my job.
You inherited
it.
Okay.
I inherited it because another costume designer, Ruth Carter, who won an Oscar for Black Panther, she was the costume designer in season 1. And then she couldn't go back season 2. And this happens often. Most times a costume designer will start a project with a pilot and not go back for the series. The way Yellowstone is filmed, they filmed the pilot and the whole series in the same year. And she wasn't able to go back. And most costume designers don't stay on for television shows because it takes up so much of your time and you're not able to do features. So Ruth knew she couldn't come back, and we were on the phone chatting about another project that I was being considered for, and really going to. Sorry, that's my pooch. Right, he's all excited. So, and so we're talking about another project that I was considering, and I was really just sort of in there. We were talking on the phone for probably 2 hours, and at the end of the conversation, she says, "Well, Jonetta, I'm not going to be able to go back to Yellowstone." And I thought, wow. And I never thought that she would ask me if I'd like to take it on. And she did. And of course I said, yes. And I put everything else aside.
Awesome.
Wow.
And so, in our industry, we want to know that if for any reason I couldn't come back next season because I was booked on another project, I would like to know that if I handed it off, that I would hand it off with someone who was able to continue with the same thread of authenticity that was there when I was there, and that I also was able to achieve when someone passed it off to me.
Wow, cool.
So you'll find in most television shows, there's not one person who's been on from the beginning and for the whole life of the show.
Interesting.
So there's so many characters. Is it hard to dress each and every single one of them for body types? And do you even think about that, or do you think about the costume first and then the body type second, or does that not even come into play?
Well, for the most part, if this were another show, body type definitely comes into play. But for this particular show, it's not so much the body type because the costumes are pretty standard. Everyone has a shirt, jeans, their rodeo buckle with their belt, a cowboy hat, boots, and their outerwear. The difference for me is when I have so many characters playing in one scene. I could have 12 people in one scene to make sure that everyone isn't wearing the same color. Everyone's going to have on jeans, yes. But if what I will do is, for instance, behind me, there's a rack of clothing. So what we do is we set up the whole line for an entire episode. We'll set up the line, and it has dividers for each character. And I'll look at the line and I'll start plugging in the parts, myself with my assistant. And the first thing that goes in, of course, is the jeans, because everyone's jeans are similar, not the same. So there may be 5 people that I have wearing a cowboy cut jean, but it's a different size, and it may be a boot cut, or it may be a straight, or it may be a relaxed fit. So we'll work in the jeans because everyone has the jean that they wear. Then once we get from the jean, we'll work in all the other pieces, and then we'll start to factor in the shirts. And we'll look at the rack and say, wow, we have 8 blue shirts. We have to take some of the blue out and add in other colors. That works really great if you only have one scene that you're shooting for the day or in the episode. But in the episode, if it's 5 actual days, different days, then that's when it gets to be super tricky.
Wow.
Because now I've gone from 1 costume for 12 people to 5 costumes for 12 people that all play in the same day, that all have to be tracked. And if it's just for one scene, that's great, but it's a whole episode. So I have to make sure that there's some sense of harmony throughout the entire episode with all the other characters that play in the episode as well.
Maybe
So
you
it's a
should
bit
talk
of
to
a
Mr.
task,
Sheridan
actually.
and ask him if you could just have more scenes with Rip. You know, he has like the simple costume. So maybe
She
Mr.
loves
Sheridan
him.
could do something like
So
about
cute.
that.
She loves him.
Sam would really
I
like
just
to know
wanted-
how his beard gets so shiny. She's very
Right.
That's a very important
Black
thing to
and
her.
shiny. Yeah.
Well, we have a full makeup and hair department, so they maintain all of that.
Yeah, it's so shiny.
I think when
Just
she
want to
was
know too. I mean, we're so into. We want to know if we can get the brand too. We want
Yes.
to have the brand as well. Too.
Right?
You can get the
You can
brand.
have that.
I'm surprised someone hasn't come up with, those adhesive
Right.
tattoos.
Yeah.
Tattoos
There
down.
you go.
Right.
Yeah.
And your hat is just wonderful. I love
Yes.
it. So I just have to
Thank
tell you, it's great. So
Yes.
you can tell we're fans.
Yes.
So anyway, we just love it. You're so creative. I can't believe and imagine all that you do. We take it for granted because we get to see the other side.
Yes.
It's always on the back side that's so busy, but you're so creative and I can see your passion in what you do.
Yes.
And I just think it's so wonderful that you have the creativity to do that. I just have to praise you. I'm sorry. It's just all wonderful. So
Thank
it's just
you.
wonderful. And we're all like just so, taken in by it. So,
Yes.
it's really wonderful. So
It's definitely, it's great that you mentioned that because it is a passion. If it's just a job, then it translates. It's just a job. But when you actually love what you're doing, you can do it from sun up to sundown, or even in your sleep, and it's not a chore. It's not, it doesn't become a burden. It's because that's what you love to do, and you don't look forward to doing anything other than that.
right.
So
It's so nice. I'm sorry, excuse me. Go ahead.
no, it's okay. It's I couldn't even think of doing anything else.
It's so nice to talk to people like yourself, though, because you are so passionate, and just that passion, no matter what area it's in, even in our company, but then to bring it all together, I say we had that common thread. It's always like the horses or whatever. It's just so much fun to see, but this is just I just can't imagine what you do. I can hardly think of stepping into your shoes and what you do every day. So really interesting.
Yes, it is. It does come with its challenges. It absolutely does. And that's what people may not necessarily notice is how it comes with, what kind of challenges it comes with. Aside from having to select costumes for so many people every day, we also have weather that plays a part, or whatever the conditions are. It's super dusty or windy, or, there's so many elements that factor into how we're able to do our job, that sometimes our trailer is parked, half a mile from where we're on set, and we have to get everything there. It's just, and then just in the world of how you guys live your life, it's quite amazing because you suit up every day with chaps and everything that goes, and work gloves. And so keeping all those things in order for 12 people, when you're doing it yourself, you know where everything is.
Yeah.
But when you're picking up behind 12 or 14 or 20 people that may not, they are walking and they're moving to the next place and didn't realize that their gloves fell out of their pocket. It's, it really is or we have lots of stunt doubles. So, we have 3 people that have to wear the exact same thing, and we may not have necessarily been able to get the same size shirt that each person needs. So one person wears a double extra large, but then one person may wear medium, and then one person may wear a large, and how we have them all look the same with padding or not to pad. And wow, this was just one of a kind. Well, we can get some more made. How much time do we have? You have 3 days, and we're in the middle of nowhere in Montana,
Yeah.
So it definitely has its challenges, for sure.
It sounds like it.
Mm-hmm.
Mikey, do you have a question?
No, I was just going to add, I think when Sam asked if you interviewed for the position, she was sort of getting at how she could interview for maybe assistant to Rip in some matter.
That's a brilliant idea. Brilliant.
Hey, we
I
don't want to
accept.
take anybody to the train station. Come
Yeah.
on, watch it.
Okay. That's funny.
Yeah, it's very interesting because in our culture and in our careers, you have people who interview, and there's seemingly people who may not have a relationship with someone within the environment, and then you have people that are recommended because they're more suited for the position or the project.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working on a project a number of years ago, and I interviewed with the director, and we, had a very nice long conversation, and we got along really well. And I was the first person she interviewed, and then she didn't interview anyone after that. And I didn't even realize that until one of my colleagues sent me an email and said, I wanted to interview for the job that you've gotten, and I wasn't even allowed to interview. How did you get the job
Wow.
so fast? And I said, I don't know what to tell you. I just, sometimes it works like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it doesn't, not in all cases, but when you interview with someone and you're actually able to relate to them on the same level, and they know that you're seeing the same, you have the same vision to foresee everything through to the end, with the same sense of authenticity and vigilance and commitment, most times they feel as though they're good and they don't need to look anyplace else. And so for Yellowstone, I guess it worked. It worked for Taylor. Taylor went off of a recommendation of not just Ruth, but also other people in her department who had a really strong voice. And he listened. And for him, he just didn't feel like it was necessary to go out and try and hunt for that person, because that person was already, whether it was me or not, I'm sure it happened with other departments as well.
Yeah.
Because not everyone has been on since season 1.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's really great about him, is that he listens. If he has a need, then he listens to, people who are in that area to help fulfill the need.
Yeah.
And it worked out well.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out. Sometimes that person comes in and there's just so many differences that maybe weren't shared at the time. And it doesn't, it may not necessarily be a good fit, but
So speaking of jobs, do you offer any internships in your department?
Oh, so that was true, that question.
No.
Well, in your department specifically.
So, normally in the film industry, we don't have internships because it's a union regulations for safety.
Okay.
So if they allow interns to come in, then they would be allowed to come in by way of a college,
Right.
so that the person would receive their accreditation, and then also so that they're covered within the format, however the insurance works. But I believe that things have lightened up a little bit, and that now the internships are being approached from a different direction. And then also a lot of times, what's happening now in the world of film and entertainment is that they'll have production assistants come in for specifically in my department. So if we aren't allowed to have interns, then we'll have people come in and work as a costume production assistant, and that's how they get their feet wet, learn, and then they actually get a bit of a salary at the same time, because they also, they sort of shy away from internships because they don't want people working for free, which
Yeah.
is fantastic,
Yeah.
So it's just tricky because, when you're working in a remote area, if you don't live in that area, then you'd have to travel yourself there and find some place to stay. And so then seemingly you're actually paying to be there to do the job.
Sure.
So it only works out if you have, a source of living, because the income that you make isn't enough to afford you to live. Or if you are able to, if you have savings set aside, or depending on your age, if your parents say, go, I'd rather pay for that than school. Sometimes, that does come up, where people themselves would say, you can't learn what you learn when you're working on a show like this in a textbook.
Right.
I love school. I love school. I'm actually taking courses right now myself. But some things you can only learn when you're on the ground. Like, you can't learn how to ride a horse on Zoom.
Right.
You have to get on a horse.
Right.
Right. So in some cases it's more valuable. Even when I began, I did things where I didn't take a salary at all, because the value itself was in what I was learning and coming away with. And there's no amount of money that I could pay to get that. So yeah.
Additionally, I do have another question. What do you do with all the extra clothes, like once you're done with the season?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure what they're going to do with these clothes when we're done with the season. On my last series, there was a giant sale, and they sold everything, which is tricky because then sales have to be managed. And when you have as much as we have, it's impossible for you to have a sale in a remote area where it's actually going to be a successful sale. The whole point of having a sale is to sort of recoup some of the funds that you put into the project.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what they would do in this particular case with this show once it's had its final season. In a lot of cases also, when you're working on studio productions, everything goes back to the studio. So Paramount has its own costume department, for instance. And so everything would go back packaged to the Paramount's costume department, and then other Western shows would be able to pull from that for their next show.
Okay.
That's, some studios operate like that. Sony, Disney, Universal, they have their own huge warehouse and that you're able to go to.
So there's no chance that you could send me a pair of Rips pants?
Oh my gosh.
I was just curious. If not, I get it. But
She has a bag for him.
She has it.
I was just wondering.
Yeah.
She really does.
It's just
Well,
so dreamy.
On that note.
Well, after we get done seeing those scenes, we all want to either go out and find a cowboy to talk to or go ride our horses. I'll tell you,
Ride our
we do.
horses.
It gets us so
Or
excited. We want to go out and ride. So
Yeah.
it's really exciting. You do inspire us, and the equestrians I know that are listening probably feel the same way. So it's been fun to talk about. So thank you.
We hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast and encourage you to share with all your equestrian family and friends. You can tune into the Late Night Riders podcast show every Friday night. Each episode will be uploaded exclusively on YouTube, where you can subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all of our latest shows. Do you have a topic you'd like us to discuss? We want to hear from you. You may email us at podcast@ramfence.com or feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you again for listening.